What's going on with this Lexus brake part? Stick around and I'll show you. Good day everyone, GarageKing here, and today we are going to do the front brakes and the front brake rotors on a 2010 Lexus IS250. Now this is a second generation Lexus IS250, so 2005 to I believe 2012 should all be the same. So let's finish raising this vehicle, let's yank this tire and get to it. So let's take a look at the front of this rotor. You can see there's a rust ring here. It looks like the ring of Saturn on it, and that's going to prevent you from having your maximum braking efficiency just because it's rough. These rotors are supposed to look like a mirror, nice and smooth. This obviously isn't the case. They're even too thin. I'll try to throw up an arrow here somewhere where you can see how thin they are because they've actually worn so much, so there's no way we can even turn them. But before we get into deep diving into this brake job, I'd just like to say if you could give it a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. And I would appreciate even more if you subscribe, but thumbs up would mean the world to me, so really would appreciate that. So now let's get back to this brake job and let me explain how to do it. To get these ones off, it's just a 14 mil bolt right there, 14 mil bolt right there. If this happens to spin, we're gonna put a thin 17 mil wrench in there just to hold this so we can undo these. And then we're gonna take out the pads from the caliper, we're gonna change them, and we're gonna pop off the rotors. Now on these ones here, if the rotor gets stuck for whatever reason, you can see it's threaded. It's threaded right there, and that's metric threads, and right there as well. So let's get you a better look. There we go, and there you can see the threads right there. So we just turn a screw in there. We'll see if we need to, and if we have to, then that's fine. We'll do that, and that's how we'll get the rotors off. Here we got our pry bar. There we go. Fairly tight. Hopefully we don't have a seized caliper or anything. We'd have to change a whole caliper. We can see our pads right there, and they're going to be tight. So I'm going to pry those out, just like so. So now what we're going to do is just head back to the caliper, and what we want to do is push the piston in, obviously, but before we do that, we just want to give that piston a nice clean. So we're just going to knock any loose rust off it, anything like that, just because the cleaner it is, the better it is when we push it in. And now what I'm going to do is I have a fancy tool. I'll put a link in the description below. It's probably one of the tools I use the most on brake jobs. This thing is absolutely awesome. What it does is it applies equal force when you're ratcheting your caliper piston back in. And it pretty much works on all cars that I've used anyway. It works on the front. Some of the vehicles it works for the rear as long as you can fit it in. But it's a great tool, and this way when you're pushing in the piston from the brake caliper, you don't push it in sideways like you would when you're using a big set of pliers or something like that. So this tool is really handy and highly recommended. I use it all the time. So once you're done this, what we're going to have to do is just hang the caliper. So I usually just use one of those rubber things. I hook it to the strut, and then this way it takes most of the weight. So most of the weight is on that rubber, and there's very little on the brake line, so we're safe to leave it like this, and now it's out of the way. Okay, so these two bolts that we're going to take out and back are 17 millimeter bolts. So we want to take those out, so we're going to get our air gun in behind there. And there we go. Loose, just like that. Nice and easy. So now what we're going to do is take out the top bolt, just like this. And now we can take our bracket right off. Okay, so here we have our new pads. Here's the old pads, here's the new pads. So what we want to do with these new pads is we just have to put these little, I don't know what you call them, some little type of tang or something like that. I don't know what the heck you call them. But anyway, all you do is you just clip them to the pad. Just like so. There we go. And what those do is when they ride within the caliper here, so then this way your pads don't ride back and forth. So if here's your caliper, you don't want it going click, 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 click back and forth. So these are sort of like little springs, and they're just gonna make it tighter. That's all they do. So we're just going to put the other one back on as well. So let's put it on here like so. There we go, just like so. So we have them both here. And now what we're going to do is clean this up, because this definitely has to be cleaned up. And if you notice, we have new rails where they slide, so we're going to install those. But before we install those, what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure we clean it first with a wire wheel. And also what we have to do is take these out because these pins are, I can't even move them. So hopefully we can get these pins out and they're not 100% seized. They seem very, very tight. Okay, so we got the pad here, or sorry, the caliper bracket here, and we can see there's no way I'm going to be able to take them out with my hand. I can pull and I just can't get them out. So what we do is we put a wrench on them, and you can see we can actually move them with a wrench, and that's what we're going to have to do. So we can pull the rubber boots down so we can pull them away because we don't want them to rip. So there we go. I've pulled the rubber boots down, as you can see, and now what I'm going to do is now I can kind of twist this as I'm pulling like this just to take it out, and it is quite tight. Worst case scenario, we're gonna have to put it in the vise and then I can take them out with the vise, but I think I can get it out. And it's gonna take too long, so let's not waste our time. Let's go over to the vise. Okay, so let's put this in the vise. So we're just gonna stick this so we can get this out here. There, we can pull on it this way. There we go. Got her out. So that's one pin out. I don't know why it was so tight. It was just really tight. So we're just gonna wipe this pin off, just like so. And if we pan over to our wire wheel, we're just gonna clean our pin up a little right in here. And you can see, there we go. There, that's good. That's nice and clean. So next up is to make sure that the bores are clean. And what I mean by that is that's where the pins ride. So what I usually do is I just take a little screwdriver, put it inside there, just wiggle it around, try to make sure it's all clean. And then what I'll do next is I'll put a little bit of lube on top of the screwdriver, and then that's how I lube up the bores there. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put on our pin, especially on the flat spots. There we go. Just like so, make sure it's lubed up well. You want to make sure that you have enough in the flat spots because that's what really carries the lubricant around. No one really tells you that. And there we go. So we're going to put this one back in. And there we go. Take the air out and that moves nice. Now this one here is really, really tight. I could barely move it with a wrench. And actually, if you see up there up close, it is full of rust. So I don't want to heat it because we're going to damage all the rubber in it if I heat it with the torch. So we're just going to go back and forth in the vise to try to take it out. Because you don't want to snap these bolts either. And this one is really, really tight. I put some penetrating fluid in there. So I'm just going to keep working it back and forth. Let's get our screwdriver in there to open it up. So we can get our straw right in there, like so. And it's moving, it's tight, but it's moving. And we got it off. So at least we got it apart. Let me tell you, there's been times where I cannot get these things apart, but look at this. This is really, really rusted, so no kidding, it was tight. So what we're gonna have to do is just clean this up. We're gonna have to head over to the wire wheel, do our best to clean it up, but I do think that this one's salvageable, so let's head over to the wire wheel. And there you go. You can see we've cleaned it right up. So that is good. So now what we're gonna do is we gotta clean out in here and make sure that any rusted or dried areas, we try to clean out as best that we can. So we're going to clean where the pads actually ride. Now I should say before I pull these out, you should notice on these Lexus that the top parts here are a little bit different than the bottom parts here. You can see these bottom parts have this springy part right here. You can actually see it sticking out.
here's a springy part, I'm pushing on it, and the top part doesn't have it. So they actually look different. So you got to make sure that you put the right ones where they're supposed to go. Now, when you put the pads in, the pads will go this way. The springy part on the pads is at the bottom, and that will coincide with the springy parts in the caliper holder. See right here, or the pad holder, part of the caliper right there? So they're all gonna go together like this. So on the top, you don't have the springy parts.
So I'm back and I cleaned the caliper bracket up outside. I just used the wire wheel. You can see there it's nice and clean. I always try to use the wire wheel on these things outside because you definitely don't want to be breathing in the brake dust. If you really have to do it indoors, make sure you wear a mask because you definitely want to protect your lungs from this stuff. Not nice to breathe in. So now we're just going to put some anti-seize in here where I've cleaned. And you know what? There is no moving parts here. So some people may say, well, you know, why do you really even need anti-seize? Well, it's just mainly to prevent rust. That's the big thing. You want to prevent rust. So I'll take my time doing this. And I don't really want to speed through it because I want everyone to see this part. You can see there, they just sort of snap in. Make sure you have the little tangs where they're supposed to go. And as I showed you earlier, the ones, I guess if you want to call them on the downside of the caliper, are different than the ones on the top side of the caliper. I guess bottom and top, if we can say that. They are different. You can see there's the bottom ones. They have those springs. You can see them poking out. And now I'll grab the top ones. I'll put them in. And you can see they have no springs. So they do look a little bit different. So I just want to explain why it's so important to clean. If you don't clean them, your pads that snap right into here, what'll happen is you'll get a rust spot, and it's right in behind where the caliper body meets the, I guess, these inserts. And then what happens is it pushes them out. You don't have enough clearance, and then you get really, really tight pads, and that can cause really fast wearing. So you don't want to have that. So that's why you got to clean them. So now it's time to put the last caliper pin in, but before we do that, we just got to lubricate it up well, so that's not a big deal. We can use some of this caliper pin grease that came with the pads, so we can use that. I threw up an arrow. Make sure that groove is nice and clean, because if it's not, what's going to happen is it's just going to corrode really, really fast again, so make sure that groove is clean. So now it's time to put the pin back in, and you can see when I put the pin back in, it actually forces its way back. So this little pin does not want to go in, but what it's actually doing is the rubber on the inside, the rubber seal, is providing a really good seal, and it's just compressing the air that's in there, and that's why it's pushing back. So kind of like how an engine works, we got some compression going on there. But anyway, once you wiggle it a bit and then just make sure that you pinch the rubber boot to get out any excess air, it'll be good and it will move freely. So next up is the anti-seize. So we got to go and put some anti-seize right where the pads ride, and this is just to prevent rust and help them ride there a little bit easier. So that's important. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to put some brake stop squeal on. Now, if you buy it in a spray, obviously spray the pads first, then install them. But if you buy it in a tube like here, how I have it, you can install the pads first, and it makes it easy. And you can see the back. There's the circle for the inboard piston. Okay, so let's head back to the rotor. Now, for me, I got really lucky and it just sort of popped off once I took the brakes off. Most of the times you got to use the 2 holes there for the screws or other means, a little bit of elbow grease, but we got lucky here. Now, I just want to say, unless you bought your car new, asbestos in aftermarket parts was used up until 2019, at least in Canada anyway. So it's very important that you take all safety precautions when you're cleaning because you will be generating some dust. So I just want to put that out there. So make sure you're wearing, ear protection, obviously, eyes. You don't want nothing going in your eyes. And wear a mask. I always wear one of those good 3M masks whenever I'm doing brakes.
Okay, so we got it nice and clean, pretty much all the rust's off. That's what we want. Now, next step is we're going to put some anti-seize on there, and then we'll put the new rotor on. There we go. So now we're going to put our new rotor on, just like so. Nothing to clean because this rotor was a coated rotor. You can see it's, actually that's my dirty paws there. So there's nothing to spray off. Now, if you don't get a coated rotor, you have to spray it off with brake clean because they ship them with some oil, and that's to prevent rust, but this one, you don't have to. Okay, so we have our pads that we loaded on the bench. We'll see if they're gonna pop out or not, hopefully not. There we go, and we can fit this in just like so. We'll put our knee there to hold it. It's always good to have extra body parts available. One bolt.
And if you can see, I'm not using my impact gun to put the bolts in. It's just too easy to over tighten things with the impact gun. So what I do is I take everything apart with the impact gun and then I put everything back together by hand.
Okay, so we got our trusty ratchet. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put our caliper back on top. Just like that. And we got our bolts. And our 14 mil wrench. We'll tighten the caliper up. And that's it. Done. So let's pan to the front.
So the brakes are done. So you know what? Last step is to check out what we used for tools. So let's see.
So just some, well, that's lubrication, and that's the disc brake stop screw. And then actually I use the anti-seize as well. So I use the gun to take the wheel off. No problem there. I used 17 mil with the gun to get the caliper bracket off. You don't need that, but what you do need is 17 mil. There you go on a ratchet. I used a 17 mil on the back of the caliper as well. I always use a little screwdriver, it seems, in every video. I just use them. For this one, I use it to lubricate inside the board. My cleaning tool there, my angle grinder. And I had a 14 mil wrench there for the back of the caliper. Now, I did have a 17 mil on standby. This is that thin one in case of turn, but I never needed it. But I had it on standby because you just never know when you might need one. So I had that. So other than that, that's pretty much it.
As always, any questions, anything like that, leave them below. I answer everything. Other than that, GarageKing over and out, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.